oh God, let me help this poor crippled lady. No, nothing like that happened at all. Because at that point, you're out of that kind of state. Instead, you witness this lady hobbling along. This energy flows out intensely, and it's an exquisite sensation. It flows out, flows in, and you see the lady, she stops hobbling and she walks away. It happens of its own. Yeah, one is merely the witness. This energy is what does it. The energy did it for years, and the irrecoverable, most hopelessly advanced, serious, psychotic, insane, degenerated, neurologic, bizarre creatures would be brought in from all over the world, wrapped up in wet sheets, squirming on the ground, and hair all mad like that. And this energy would connect with the self within the being there, and you would feel the inner healing. The inner being was in a state of peace and grace. What happened to the physicality is irrelevant. That's why I tell people when you do the Course in Miracles, whether it cures you of something, if the Course is successful, it's irrelevant. Once the Course takes hold, what happens to the physicality is totally irrelevant. It may or may not heal itself. If it does, fine. If it doesn't, fine, because it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. The Kundalini energy is what, I call it Kundalini energy because that's what the Gopi Krishna wrote about it, and it seems like we just determined. It's in the high 500s, and it just is an exquisite state. And in that state, you can only see and experience love and beauty. Nothing else exists. The garbage cans are beautiful. Everything, you can see the artistic beauty of the garbage can. You can see how every weed is perfection. And to this day, it makes no difference to me whether a thing is a weed or a diamond. Neither one. Frankly, I don't need either one, but they're equal. From that point on, you don't need anything from this world or from anyone. You don't need anything from this world. There's nothing that this world has that has any appeal to it. That's why. In the infinite presence, there is no lack, so there's nothing you would want to reach out for. There's nothing that you want or need. There is nothing temptable, and that's why it's hard to understand why some gurus have fallen, because in that state, there's nothing that can appeal to you. So what was appealed to must have been some remnant. So that Kundalini energy then pours in. In the beginning, there may be aches and pains. I think it's because the human nervous system is not made for that. And I think we calibrated it in a previous meeting. The human nervous system is made for spiritual energies that calibrate up to 600. And beyond that, you should go to other realms. Go to other realms. It's designed for other realms. So we said Homo Spiritus and the new emerging advance of Homo sapien is in the process of developing a stronger nervous system that can actually handle more advanced spiritual energies. Right now up to about 600 is all that's comfortable. It's comfortable up to around 700. And then beyond that, it becomes painful. Beyond that, you're like the Buddha said, you're beset by demons. There's aches and pains and fiery, I can only liken it to barbed wire that's running electricity through it, and it's red hot, and your whole nervous system becomes like that, and it's agonizing. And that means there's something out, and you've got to find out what that is, and you've got to clear that through very intense prayer and all. So the human nervous system then is made to handle energies up to 600, up to 700 actually. And how should we pray? Well, we should pray by the way we are in the world, to respect and have reverence for all of life, and the sanctity of all that exists is the epitome of prayer. To acknowledge God as the source and the presence of all existence in all of its expressions is the epitome of prayer. People think of prayers in terms of asking for favors. Oh God, I want a Mercedes-Benz. She was something else, wasn't she? When she sang Ball and Chain, the whole audience was just suspended. There's a long pause there in the music, and everybody sits on the edge of their seats, so they stand on their seats, and then she comes through with that note, and they all go, oh! To my mind, prayer is not just a recitation. See, the intention of the recitation is undoubtedly quite powerful, just like prayer wheels. It's the intention of the prayer wheel that gives it its spiritual power, resist. Right. So whether you burn sticks, walk back and forth around the squares and the floor of the cathedral, whatever you do in the name of God, for the sake of God, is like karma yoga, having been done for thee, O Lord. For thee, O Lord, do I thusly peel potatoes, vacuum the floor, suffer the aches and pains of this body, write thank you letters, send Christmas cards, pay my taxes. Whatever I do, if I do it in the name of God, because by doing that, your understanding of the nature of God keeps expanding. And that in itself is a grace to see the opportunity, and to follow that opportunity in itself is positive karma, is itself grace. Other people walk through great opportunities and don't see them. They're blind. And we can only feel sorry for them that they don't see the great opportunity there. What is the difference between attachment and detachment? Well, attachment is one of the biggest problems in getting rid of the ego, and probably the most important one. If you can get rid of attachments, then you've saved yourself years of spiritual work. The attachment itself is to some illusion to what you get out of something. Detachment is to say no to it, to negate it, to refuse it. Attachment means to be hooked on it. Detachment would be indifference. Detachment very often is the pathway of no, asceticism, which is also cool. You can be real happy with a cot, a box, a candle, and an apple a day, and no money. It's easy. It's terrific. You walk around free as a bird. You walk into town, somebody says, hey, my mother just made some donuts. You want one? Right. You walk to somebody says, you want to ride somewhere? And I said, yeah, I was thinking of going down. It just, everything happens mystically, just wonderfully. Don't need anything. The downside of asceticism is that one can get attached to asceticism. You get off on holiness and being bony. Never taking a shower, never washing your hair. You can sit there cross-legged, this bag of bones. And maybe the ascetics of India are the best example. I don't know that God's pleased by that or not. Probably not. I'm just kidding. I've been into asceticism, and you can get high on asceticism, I'll tell you, you do. You don't need anything. It's fantastic. You can walk out of the house without a nickel, nothing to eat, and everything gets provided day after day. It just happens. The miraculous becomes constant. Of course, when you're detached, you're not attached to the survival of life and the body, which can be annoying to your family. They want you to take care of it and eat and all kinds of strange things. Get haircuts, take their medicine, see the doctor. It's a drag. Anyway. Anybody forces you to take all these measures, you do it because you love them, frankly. That's why you do it. Left to your own, you wouldn't bother. Left to my own, I wouldn't bother eating. I mean, what would you bother eating for? I used to not eat for long periods of time, and it would only dawn on me I hadn't eaten all week. And it's like you didn't need food. What would you want food for? The perfect state is neither attraction nor aversion, neither attachment nor detachment necessarily, but non-attachment. So the present state is to be not attached. You don't have an aversion, nor do you have an attraction. And if there's something for dinner, that's great. And if there isn't something for dinner, that's also great, because you're not attached, one way or the other. Non-attachment. It means you're not run by it anymore. You're not run by it. And tapas, the traditional way of TAPAS, is the practice of non-attachment to things. If you always have to have your dinner at 5:30, then you stop doing that until you get over that yin that it's got to be on the table at 5:30 or your whole life's going to be upset, etc. When you say divine intervention is needed to save us, I hear divinity as something other. But there is no other to save us from what? Okay. Divine intervention is just a style of speech. It means out of good karma, out of the karma which may arise out of the good karma of this instant. I asked God to help me. Came out of must be horrific negative karma to end up in the depths of hell. Perhaps in that instant was all the karma by grace. All it requires was the one act. From here to there. Heaven and hell are a tenth of an inch apart, it says in Zen. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Hitting bottom may be the fastest way to heaven. That's why intervening and being an enabler is interfering with the other person's karmic lesson. You keep running in and saving them and hauling them off to the hospital and give me a break. The mother used to call me up, the family called me up. You want to stop drinking? And I said, you know what to do? What? I said, buy him a case of whiskey and put him in a hotel room. And call me back when he's done. Right, that's the best way to help this guy. And when he runs out of a case of whiskey, buy him another case of whiskey. Pretty soon, the voices are after me, Mom. Help, help. Okay, Junior, now we'll take you to the hospital. When you're not ready, folks. You know what I mean? So, that's true. Buy him a case of whiskey and leave him be. Why are you messing with this guy and interfering with his karma? Why? Because the good karma only comes when he surrenders to God. When he says, God, I've gone as far as I can go. If there is a God, I ask him to help me. That stops the insanity. When you admit that you of your own nature, your little lone ego in the middle of the universe can't hack it, can't do it, that's truth, that's integrity. So you cross over the line of integrity. I myself cannot do it, no. Only by grace. And you realize that you've been insane. And you ask God to help you, and you surrender your life to God. From that moment on, your life is transformed. And this room is full of people whose lives have been transformed in just that way. So the grace then is that is present and available every moment. It doesn't mean that it's going to be answered at every moment. You can pray up a storm for 20 years and nothing happens. Then you say, the heck with prayer, I give it up. And at that instant, and then you realize you've been trying to control God with prayer. You've been trying to control him, that you weren't really surrendering. Because if you totally surrender to God, it doesn't matter whether the rheumatism continues or not. I mean, the ailments that you have are really irrelevant, unless they interfere with functioning. Today I had to speak, and all week long I had some terrible virus. Anyway, I thought, well, either you speak Saturday or you don't speak. If you don't speak, you don't speak. If you don't speak, you won't say anything. In which case, we'll just sit together and pray, maybe. This asks about beings below the 200s. As we said, this world seems, from my personal viewpoint, if I use the term personal in its usual vernacular, the world seems purgatorial in design. Why? Because you go from the very lowest element, the reptile, the great dinosaurs at 70 lived by ravaging and slashing and killing. They live solely by the death of others. The dinosaur lives only by killing you. Its sole purpose is to kill you because you are food. That's about as low as you can get, right? I guess worse would be kill you and not eat you. At least they eat you. That's starting somewhere anyway. Anyway, we get to, all we can say is that consciousness evolved on this planet. It seemed to come up from, and there are still beings at the bottom of the sea who are really awesomely awesome. And we see that it evolved over great eons of time, millions of years, 400 million years, for instance. And then we see consciousness slowly come up to where it has been, And we see that life on this earth has been a reflection. All right, so life, we said that the world of form is the consequence of that which is held in consciousness. This is a world of effects. It's not a world of causality. It's a world of effects in which that which is held in consciousness creates this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And as you walk down the path, you think it's sequential. It's not sequential. It's continuous. Creation is continuous. All things are constantly the result of an ongoing creation which is continuous. Creation, to be creation, cannot start and stop. That which is outside of time has no capacity to start and stop. Thusly, everything that is happening is the continuous expression of creation, the divinity, the infinite power of God, bringing potentiality into manifestation. And consciousness, as it evolved then, reached 190 for centuries, now is at 207, and life has changed. Discuss the Trinity, God, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's interesting because it caused the great division of the Christian church, the Eastern and the Western, Constantinople. And Rome split over this whole concept of And it has a theological name, I forget, for what the argument is about. There's different ways of looking at things. Because reality is a total, complete oneness, it cannot have any triune quality. It can have a triune quality from a certain perception, from a certain level of perception. And we see the triune quality of divinity in the world's religions. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, we see it in Christianity, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. When we say God the Son, we're talking about divinity as it is expressed in form. That divinity can express itself through the human, through the great avatar. We see that God is invisible to ordinary perception as that which is transcendent. God is immanent then within the avatar, and what makes it immanent is the Holy Spirit itself. So the Holy Spirit would be like the radiance of God, the energy field of God, which may then express itself, at least to a limited degree, within a physicality. It's the invisible context. When we pray, that's what we're praying to, is we've changed the quantum potentiality. How does prayer work? It changes the quantum potentiality. If you follow quantum mechanics, you realize that merely to witness or observe a thing already changes it. The past and the present and the future change. The future now becomes the past, and the past becomes the future, etc. Because you're out of linearity. The human mind really can't conceive, doesn't really understand quantum mechanics, because only the spiritually evolved person gets what it's saying. That which you are is influencing everything else that exists. By the virtue of that which you are, you change the charge and the potentiality, and therefore the likelihood of a thing coming into actuality and form, depending on local conditions. Every one of us then, by their style of life, by their devotion, by their witness to the acknowledgement of the sacredness of all of life, lifts the consciousness of all of mankind. All of mankind is benefited. Nothing goes unobserved. Not a hair on your head shall be missed. That turned out to be accurate. I remember when I first discovered the capacity of kinesiology to tell truth from falsehood, and I realized that everything that ever existed is registered forever in the field of consciousness. I said, whoa, every hair on your head shall be counted. Well, it's the truth, it's a fact. Every sparrow that falls is noted. The intrinsic divinity of existence is equal in all, witnessed, acknowledged by all. When we say God immanent, God transcendent, when we talk about Trinity, God, Son, and Holy Spirit, those are only linguistic, conceptual, rationalistic positionalities from which to approach the subject. When you read theology, you realize what a difficult job that is, to try to describe the nonlinear in terms that are linear. To describe that which is indefinable, let's see how you can define the indefinable. That's what theology is about. Class, we will define the indefinable. Okay, so you see the difficulty. However, you see, you can also see the devotion in that, because many of the great intellectual, spiritual teachers of history in the religious thing were very learned. They were doctors of theology. Their devotion was to the truth, and it took the form of seeking truth through the intellect and reason and logic. So one can still be respectful of the devotion behind the endeavor to try to reach, if you read about the books, it'll discuss whether God is immanent or transcendent. Well, this is an artifact of mentation. It couldn't possibly be either or. God being the essence of all that exists, the allness throughout and beyond all time, could hardly be limited, could hardly be divided into transcendent, which is out there, and immanent, which is in here. Those are obviously just artifacts of human mentation. We've sort of touched upon prayer. We need the Newtonian versus to put it within conceptual basis. I don't want to spend much time at this, but it's worth. For the doubting Thomas, there are people who are stuck in their intellect and victims of it. Can't get out of my brain, dog. Can't get out of logic. So I know he can't. But God in his infinite mercy knows that. That you are stuck in your head. For those who are stuck in their head then, it's okay to be spiritual because we now have a scientific explanation for the reality of the spiritual. This is the Newtonian paradigm of reality on the left, in which things are discrete, orderly, logical, definable, measurable, and it's what the material reductionist, the hardcore scientist says is what's real. If you can't measure it, you can't weigh it, can't locate it in time and space, it's not real. That's sort of taking great liberties with the word real. In fact, it's really missing what real is about, but anyway, that's beside the point. So this is the world that we presume to be reality, except that actually we don't, because nobody lives on that level. We entertain ourselves with that level, but we all know we live on the experiential. You either like the plum pudding or you don't. It's got too much this in it or too much that. The liver is fried too hard and it's tough as leather or it isn't, you know what I'm saying? So this is where we live over here. We live in the infinite quantum potentiality. As we get smaller and smaller below the atom, below the subparticle physics, we get to like potential energies that are so minute that they cannot be measured. And we enter a different realm. We enter the world where we live. Where we live is in spirituality. People say, I don't believe in spirituality. Idiot, you live there all day long. In fact, what just said you don't live in spirituality is what spirituality is. It's a subjective conclusion, and how did that come about? It's the totality of all one's thinkingness, time, throughout all of time, one's karmic inheritance, and what your consciousness level is now that leads you to feel that way within yourself, that gives it that sense of truth that you say, this is so. Highly complex, completely nonlinear. So, where we live is really disorderly. Anything can happen within your experiential life. You can go to your favorite opera and be disappointed instead of ecstatic. You can buy your best ice cream that you've always liked your whole life and decide it's disgusting. You know what I'm saying? Nothing. You can't really predict what's going to happen. It's creative, it's free, it's imaginative, it's progressive, it's diffuse, it's non-local, it's experiential, it's expansive, it's the context out of which we live. It's the subjective state. And at all times, we're really poised for the next instant. The context of our life, then, is unlimited. At every moment, we're poised for the next instant. Without even being conscious and aware that we're poised, at every instant, everybody here is ready to jump. That jumpingness can happen out of non-jumpingness. Nothing said jump in the head, it just jumped, see? So everything is happening spontaneously as an expression of the essence of the reality of that which it is. This entire lecture was prepared exactly 1/10,000th of a second ago. Jump wasn't in it, you know what I mean? Oh, here's some things about the downside of social life. The downside of social life. There are those things which are preferable and those things which are not preferable. See, if we can get beyond good and evil, we can say there's the things that we want, and we call them good, and there's the things we don't want, and we call them bad. Now here we've got, which we had before, but we didn't talk about. You see, good and bad, just like talking about the Trinity, depends on where you want to start from, and what you're talking about is a perception, and what you're talking about is the point from which you're approaching the subject. If you desire it, you say it's good, and if you don't desire it, you say it's bad. So the things that we consider tragic about society, about human life, war and the downside of the judiciary system. Yes, there is downside to it. Are because we don't want those things. So we choose what we want and we repel that which we don't want. In the highest state, they're all the same, as we said. War and peace, it's all the same. Whether you all go off with an atomic bomb, bang, or you slowly strangle to death from old age, what's the difference? I mean, you're going to leave here. Quick and easy or slow and horrible, you know what I'm saying? Leaving is leaving, and whatever karmic merit there is in the style that's chosen. But that's a very advanced state. But there is a certain level at which you can see that it really doesn't matter, because this being a karmic theater, this being a theater of great opportunity, then we can choose that which we choose and not choose that which we mean to avoid, you know. I myself wouldn't want the karma of being a judge in a murder case. No, thank you. I wouldn't want the karma of being the one that says this person dies or doesn't die or something, you know. So I think the difficulty with leading a moral or an ethical or spiritual life in the Western world, is the lack of the understanding of karma, the lack of the understanding of the nature of God, that everything and every moment determines one's spiritual destiny, that everything, every moment is an act that is witnessed by the entire universe. The entire universe witnesses every single act and every single choice and records it forever. Consequently, in the demonstrations we do of kinesiology and the potentiality of it as a research tool, we go back in history, any human being that ever lived, what they thought or felt, what they did, why they made the choice. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is hidden. So from the infinite eye of the divine, nothing is hidden. On the other hand, neither does it need to be. And that's the blessing. So we'll break for lunch. We'll see you again later, about an hour or so. I did it. To be able to function in the presence of the beauty of God is difficult and takes practice. And by lecture 11, I've made good progress. It used to be I could either be with the music or talk, but not both. How to not be wiped out by it. Question number 1 is the mind boggler of all time. How does one truly find themselves? Well, it's a snap, folks. You just realize you're the infinite allness of all existence beyond all time and expression. There you are. Didn't take long, did it? After many lifetimes, I got a neat letter from somebody the other day. He says, I've been meditating for 30 years, and suddenly, boom, how neat. There's questions about prayer, there's questions about meditation. Wonderful questions. We said that the ultimate form of prayer is the way in which you conceptualize, the way in which you contextualize your own existence from instant to instant. Meditation and prayer is more like a mudra than a recitation. It's more like a posture in which you pose your existence in the context of divinity. It's the style in which you are out of the awareness of the presence of God and one's surrender to be of service to God. That sanctifies all actions. It is by your dedication of yourself to that intention that you sanctify all your actions. Food that's prepared by a human being carries a different energy than the food that is prepared by a machine. You can find that out with kinesiology. My cat knows that. There's certain brands of food my cat will not touch. If you calibrate them, they make you go weak. She helped me. And I can tell instantly if I put a piece of bread in my mouth whether a human being's consciousness has touched this bread or not. If it's touched it, it's alive and there's a sense of wholesomeness about it. If it's made by a machine, there's certain brands of bread that you could blindfold me, and the minute you put it in your mouth, it tastes dead. Twinkies. I'm very disappointed in Twinkies. I mean, Twinkies came to mind. When I was a kid, you'd go out for, your mom would put a Twinkie in there, and that was, at lunch you'd have your Twinkie, and you'd squeeze that banana-flavored goodness out of it. Twinkies were great. One day, out of madness, I decided to buy a Twinkie for old time's sake. Man, it was deader than mackerel. I mean, it is not the same Twinkie that I grew up with. Food that is blessed carries a different energy. So the human energy does something to the energy of the food itself. So witness the mother who lovingly makes the chicken soup. It actually does cure your cold. And the tea that's made at home has cured this cold. It's because of the energy of love within it. So we transform everything that we touch. We know that people who have a green thumb, it's like they see the sacredness of beauty. They dedicate their life to the cultivation of beauty for its own sake. We sanctify that which we do then by the dedication of our life to be conscious that all one's actions are in the presence of God and that every action affects all of mankind. So your life no longer is trivial. Your life is no longer trivial. The fact that you're out on a river fishing, as you look over and you appreciate the beauty of that river and the surroundings, your appreciation of that beauty is radiating out and lifting all of mankind. So even as you sit in the rowboat, thinking that you're doing nothing, your acknowledgement of the beauty of creation itself is an act of sanctifying all of life and affirming its value and increasing its value. And that's how the consciousness level of mankind evolves, is because those who are more conscious tend to lift all of mankind. We said that the top of the levels of consciousness are numerically small, but their power outweighs all the rest of the population. One person who dedicates himself to life and sees the sacredness of all of life, and thereby sanctifies all of life as they go about the day, is lifting the consciousness of thousands of other people. Somewhere in Biafra, some little kid is laying there, slowly dying of starvation and AIDS. And out of his hopelessness and grief and apathy, suddenly there's a little spark of hope. And death is okay. Where did that come from? It came from the fisherman sitting there appreciating the beauty. You see, because the context of life is nonlinear. So in the infinite quantum potentiality, every intention on your part alters the context for everyone. Every hair on your head is counted. Every moment of your life contributes this way, or it pulls it down this way. The number of people who calibrate on the high levels has increased since 1980, whatever it was. 90s when I did it, early 90s. And the calibration of the level of all of mankind is going up. And we see, as we said, at 207, integrity no longer, people don't wink at it anymore. They put it on the front cover of Fortune magazine. Integrity is being called for by everyone. So what do you say to God when you pray? I don't know what other people say to God when they pray. I mean, I could use a few more bucks, God. Rent's due next week. I mean, I'm sure God doesn't take offense at that. It's really a serious question of how does one pray. The most effective prayer, as far as I know, is nonverbal. It is to position oneself. You know what a mudra is? A mudra is, you see divine statues. A mudra is thus. A mudra is the dance of Shiva. A mudra is a posture. A mudra is blessing. A mudra is, so it's the way you position your existence vis-a-vis divinity. It's like there's if you picture an invisible self, what would be the posture of your invisible self in the presence of God? That's how. Let's ask. We have permission to ask about that form of prayer resist. Is more effective than verbalization resist. Yeah. More effective than verbalization. It's like a supplication of your spirit to God's will. The surrender to God's will is a form of prayer. When you say, for what reason I don't know, Lord, but whatever, in thy name, see? If it's the undoing of some bad karma, you might say, I don't know what the reason for this suffering is, but I dedicate it for, the undoing of whatever karma it may be undoing, So you try to have everything subserve the good of all. The next question is about meditation. I've got them backwards. No wonder I can't read them. As you see, to hold your existence in a certain, it's almost like a benediction. It's almost like sanctifying one's own existence by your posture vis-a-vis God. As far as sitting meditation, so this in a way is a meditation. This is a way of being in the world in which one, as everything arises, one surrenders it to God, because to avoid attractions and aversions, then one becomes detached. And one surrenders all possibility to God. If this happens, you'll go bankrupt. Well, if I go bankrupt, I go bankrupt. Lots of people survive bankruptcy. They still seem to be breathing and eating. If that's what it takes to get off materiality, to get off pride and vanity of materialism, then I guess if it takes bankruptcy to do it, so let it be. Bankruptcy is one of the ways to God. After you get rid of all the money and all the big cars and all the crap, you say, I'm still me, and I still enjoy fishing, and life hasn't really changed at all, you know what I'm saying? Because love remains, love. There's formal meditation. There's meditation as a lifestyle. So what I just described to you was meditation as a mudra, as a lifestyle, which is itself a meditation. Contemplation would be the next more focused level, in which one is aware of the rising and the falling away of the feelings, thoughts, and events as they occur. The focus is on that which is a priority, that which is just before the arising of the thought and the feeling. And then let go wanting to change it, let go resisting it. And it rises, it crests, and then it falls away with no commentary. That's a complete surrender to God in the everyday activities. So you dedicate your life to God by the way in which you are with the world, with the dedication, with the reverence with which you do everything, from digging a ditch to peeling a potato to making dinner. It's all the same. It's all the same. Mm-hmm. But it makes a difference. The potato that's peeled by love and cooked with love is a different potato than one that is chopped up by a machine. That's a fact. Anybody can check it out for themselves. More formal sitting meditation, a la Zen, is a more disciplined, conscious, focused, concentrated time out from life, in which the focus can be a one-pointedness of mind on the thoughts as they arise. And in this condition, one becomes, one transcends from the experience. We have a chart that shows it. We've showed it before. You transcend identification with the thoughts, and you become that which witnesses the thoughts. Well, these are really the levels of consciousness that strict meditation will take you through. Strict meditation, the mentation goes on and on. There's no way you can stop the mentation. The mentation proliferates faster than you can counter it. So therefore, one has to transcend to become that which is witnessing the mentation as it goes by, the memories, the fantasies, the daydreams, little bits of music, ibbity-dibbity-boo, three-itty fishies in an itty-bitty bowl, all this crap goes through your head. You can't stop it. Adolf Hitler, the Third World War, I mean, all the wars, everything goes through your mind. Little bits from childhood, little pieces of music, some vignette from a television commercial, Bowflex commercial. I posed for that years ago, and they're still using it. They asked me to do a geriatric version of it, in which you only lose 5 pounds, not 400 pounds. 5 pounds will do. So at first you're preoccupied with form, and you begin to see that as we tried to stop your thoughts before, they won't stop. They won't stop. Something is registering those thoughts and recognizing them, and you realize that that within you is, while thoughts and all this is going on, something is witnessing them. You'll say, you know, George, I'm thinking about so-and-so. Who knows, or what is it that knows what you're thinking about? So there's something beyond the thinkingness that is the witness of the thinkingness. So you let go identifying with the thoughts. I mean, you can't be the thoughts. If you were the thoughts, when you told them to stop, they'd stop. So, no, you're the victim of the thoughts. You're the victim of the thoughts. What is it that's the victim of the thoughts? The watcher, the experiencer. How do you know that this watcher, experiencer, can report what it's reporting? It's because there's a quality, and what we're looking for is a quality, a non-personal quality of awareness behind the observer and the witness. So in meditation, you're trying to sense what is it that exists prior to the thought. What is it that the thoughts, how is it that they register? There is within, then, a quality to the consciousness, the quality of consciousness itself, which itself is silent. It's because of the silence, the background silence, that you can hear sound. All right, you can focus either on the sound or the silence that makes detecting the sound possible. Similarly, you can focus on consciousness, which itself is without form, but which illuminates all form. And you begin to withdraw from the thoughts. The thoughts are changing all the time. That can't be who you are. You would have been dead a long time ago. If you were your thoughts, you would have been executed a long time ago. So one withdraws one's identification to the more detached. We use the analogy also of content versus context. The thoughts themselves are the content, but what is the overall context which is holding this capacity for thought and feeling and all in the first place? What is a priority? What is more prior? Mm-hmm. You go through the whole story of your job with so-and-so and how they screwed you and didn't give you the raise you were due, etc. So you go through these stories. laments from the past, or daydreams of the future, but they're all stories. Now, the willingness to surrender the storiness of this recollection to God begins to shorten it, letting go of the wanting to think. So you'll find that thinking is coming out of a wanting to think. There's a desire to think. First of all, we think thoughts are wonderful. The reason we think they're wonderful is because they're our thoughts. Somebody else's thoughts are not really all that charming when you think of it. Honey, would you like to hear what I think about now? Okay, so we're enamored of thoughts because they're our thoughts. If they're our thoughts, they're wonderful, precious, and valuable. If they're somebody else's thoughts, they're stupid. So we get to the core of thinking this, which is the narcissistic, egocentric investment in them. Thoughts are wonderful, valuable, and valid because they're ours. My thoughts. The way you get off that is you realize that thinking this is happening of itself. They aren't your thoughts at all. As you look at the energy fields of consciousness, there are huge thought fields in which your consciousness is immersed, and the thinkingness of all of mankind is what's programming your head, together with last night's TV news, etc. We get off the vanity, so there's a secret vanity to the thinkingness. The thinkingness also brings up a feelingness, and you'll notice that all thinkingness has a payoff. You're getting one up on something, you're getting even with something. When you think negative thoughts about people, secretly you're punishing them. That crazy old bitch. That nutty old man. He deserves arthritis. We get a secret getting even kind of feeling, huh? We right wrongs. We write these wonderful stories in our head, how we right these wrongs and how the guilty are made to pay. So, all right, you see this thinkingness happens because there's a desire to think, because there's a secret payoff to thinkingness, because we think that thinkingness is valuable. It's coming from an energy. There's a root to thinkingness. As you let go wanting to dramatize everything into the form of a story, you'll see the self-indulgence of that and the egocentricity if you look at it. As your head manufactures these stories, it's strictly egocentric, it's strictly narcissistic. It's very self-indulgent. You see that the ego is in love with itself. It's getting an enormous payoff from all this thinkingness. You decide to turn the pleasure, the secret pleasure of thinkingness, over and surrender it to God. As you let go wanting to make stories, they become paragraphs. As you let go wanting to write paragraphs, they become short sentences. And then you begin to see the analogy of thoughts as they arise. It's like there's a primordial energy bed which is not yet into form. It wants to come into form. It starts to think dog. Then it thinks about old Bow Wow. And you remember how old Bow Wow was sick. And you remember how Bow Wow used to bring the paper in. And you remember how the kids used to play with Bow Wow. And there's a whole story about Bow Wow. Pretty soon you're weeping thinking about when Bow Wow died. Whoa, I mean, it just grows, right? All right, so there has to be a willingness to surrender all that. The sentimentality, the validation of yourself as the good pet owner or whatever. The letting go of the sadness of the thinking of the good old days, etc. Anyway, the long story about Bow Wow boils down to a paragraph. Then it comes down to a sentence. Then you catch the mind starting to think about Bow Wow, and you surrender it at that point. So there's a constant surrenderingness. As you do this, what happens is you nip thoughts in the bud. You'll see they're coming out of a formless Anlage, pre-form, you might say. It isn't quite dogginess yet, and the word dog doesn't exist yet, but image of dogginess. All this happens very rapidly, but it's continuous. So there's like a continuous fount of thinkingness coming out of a energy field that we could just call thinkingness, the energy like a fountain out of which proliferates thinkingness endlessly. One surrenders this to God at greater and greater depth until finally one gets to the very core of thinkingness itself. And one surrenders the identification of self as thinkingness and surrenders thinkingness to God. That is quite a sacrifice. Would you be willing to become a dumb animal who doesn't think? You can become a happy dog, but you're not going to be able to think again. You can be a happy purring kitty, but you won't be allowed to think anymore. Wow. I can't think if I'm a kitty? You can purr. I can't think anymore, God? I don't want to be a kitty. Because the identification of self is, thinkingness is part and parcel of identifying yourself as ego, as human ego. And you'll see the great reluctance with which you let go and the tenacity with which you hang on to thinkingness despite you're lamenting it. Everybody laments their thoughts. I was laying in bed and I couldn't go to sleep. It kept coming back and back. Everybody laments their thoughts. If you really lamented your thoughts, they would stop. So you think you're lamenting your thoughts, but you're secretly delighting in their torment. And you have to give up the secret delight in the torment. So in really intense meditation then, there is a willingness to surrender everything to God. Thinkingness is self. So what you end up surrendering is mind. The willingness to surrender mind itself to God. Then you discover there isn't a such thing as mind anyway. There's only thoughts. There's only thoughts. And as thoughts disappear, so does mind. There was no such thing as mind. Any more than there is such a thing as ego. But for spiritual work, we call the ego at least for a period of time. And then we reach a certain level where we realize there is no such structure and only our belief systems were holding it in place, and that it is not really an it at all. It doesn't have any independent existence. Formal sitting meditation is in itself an end, and many people have spent many a lifetime, many years in strict meditation. I myself spent I don't know how many lifetimes in meditation. It is, of course, classically the way of non-duality, the royal road to God through non-duality. The core is Zen practice, and many other practices, not just Zen. Any one of the meditative practices can bring you into various levels of satori. These levels of satori are sudden flashes where you transcend mind. Ambiguities are resolved because you see the positionality that was creating the apparent opposites, and they suddenly collapse. And so meditation itself is certainly a worthy endeavor. One's dedication of meditation to God instead of looking for a benefit. So the other block to get out of the way is to stop meditating for something. One cannot meditate in order to reach satori, in order to reach enlightenment, in order to realize one's Buddha nature. One meditates for the sake of meditation, period. Not because it will get you anything, get you anywhere, not for any alleged or imagined gain. That is a sacrifice. To sacrifice all goal. I meditate out of devotion to Thee, O Lord, period. Formal sitting meditation can last. I did it for 20 years, an hour in the morning, an hour at night. When you had more time, I used to meditate 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day, and then I went into 24-hour day meditation. Since then, I haven't meditated at all. Does enlightenment depend on grace or intent or devotion? It depends on all of them. You see, because to become interested in enlightenment or spiritual evolution or salvation, to be interested in Jesus or Buddha or anything, and going to church is already good karma, is it not? I mean, 87% of the population doesn't even get that far. 87% of the population is not devoted to truth or the pursuit of truth. To merely get on the map itself is incredible. We were going through meditation to the realization that one is the awareness. One is the space out of which the word cat arose. The space is blank. Consciousness is blank. That consciousness has been likened to a light because it's the light of consciousness itself. You realize that that is the manifestation, and beyond that is the unmanifest, because consciousness itself arose out of an a priori condition. Out of the darkness arose the light, and out of the light, consciousness. Consciousness striking matter evolved as life. That all becomes obvious. Is intention and devotion sufficient? I think so, because there's another question here about the great rays. Because I think it attunes you to the great rays. Let's ask if there is such a thing. The great rays, as described in the Course in Miracles, is a spiritual fact, resist. We have permission to ask that, resist. I should have asked permission first. The God of old. All right, God of old. What were we asking? About what? Oh, the great rays. That's farther in the pack here. We're cheating a little. There is such a thing, resist. What we're talking about is frequency vibrations over 1,000, resist. We're talking about the archangels 50,000 over, resist. Yeah. So what happens, you see, through your act of devotion, you begin to attune yourself to the great powers of heaven. See, a human being's nervous system can only handle spiritual energy up to a certain level. Beyond that, it's excruciating pain. Homo spiritus has to evolve. The human nervous system has to evolve to the point it could carry more powerful energy and still remain in a physical body in this planet. The great rays really, in a way, mean that intense spiritual commitment then attracts the attention of, what should we say in the vernacular, great spiritual beings, right? Who are out of form, out of physicality, whose dominion is enormous and whose power is enormous. As we say, what brought me out of hell was the thought of an archangel. An archangel heard the thought. That was enough. So, the entreaty, the commitment, the surrender does then invoke, you might say, the assistance of the great rays, not on a necessary, it's not like a personal basis, but as an automatic consequence of the huge electromagnetic energy field we call God. Huh? We were going to sort of draw a picture of what happens. I'm not a very good artist, but anyway. Here's this big, giant electromagnetic field, and here's all these little entities in there. And these little entities all have different plus or minuses. They've got positive poles and negative poles. And some are bigger than others, and some are wiggly woggly, and some have all kinds of scratchy things. And, okay, so anyway, every little thought, feeling that flicks through your mind already creates a frequency vibration here within the overall energy field. You can see how that moves with it. Let's say this electromagnetic field is of infinite power. If it's of infinite power, then 1/10 of a microwatt is already going to be, you see whether we change this to positive or negative. If I change this in the slightest, the whole field is affected, is it not? That's the effect of prayer. People say, what good is my little prayer? Another question that's farther into the stack is, if through spiritual work we only move a few points in a lifetime, is it worth it? Well, that's a mind-boggling question. Depends on how much you got in the market. The difference between 2.5 and 3% is not much. If you got $1 million in there, it's going to pay for your kid's graduation, you know. When we said that, we were saying all of mankind, it tends to move. Let's ask it again and reaffirm it, because that was 1995. The average, we have permission to ask about this, resist. In an average lifetime, the average person on the planet today, their consciousness moves ahead, resist. That's a relief. It moves ahead more than, on an average, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, 6 points. On an average, the average human being in a lifetime moves ahead about 5 points. That's just an average. You have to understand what an average means. It means it doesn't apply to you. It's a statistical probability. No, everybody here, I mean, there's many people here that have experienced jumps of hundreds of points in a matter of seconds. There's people who have gone, I'm aware of people who have crashed down, lost 100 points, 200 points. People have crashed from very high to very low also. So some go from here to there, others go from here to there. Other people just hold steady in this lifetime. You can choose a lifetime where you just hold steady, you know what I mean? You just want to peel potatoes and plant corn and, you know, enough's already. One lifetime to just sort of solidify where I'm at and get a breather, ready to hit the road again on the next one. You can't go through every lifetime like this one, I'll tell you. I'm not, this will last me quite a while. Now, we've had people jump a couple hundred points just during a lecture. Yeah, let's just ask. We've had people jump over 200 points in lecture resist, 250, 300. We had people jump 300 points just in one lecture resist. People in the lecture will just suddenly jump 300 points and just go, oh, nothing to it. It's obvious, okay. To merely contextualize a thing, then, makes it comprehensible. So, a lot of times just a little insight here, it seems like a small insight, but it shifts your perspective. And from a different perspective, it's a snap, you know? one's intention. So we cannot look at it like watching the stock market every day. You can't do spiritual work like, well, I'm going to check myself out every day and see if I moved ahead 5 points. God bless them. There are naive people that send me letters weekly. How am I doing this week? Can I check my calibration this week? No, that's not what it's about, folks. That's looking for payoff. Spiritual work is done for its own sake. For thee, O God, do I lay down my life. And live it to the extreme out of devotion to thee. That's all it takes. The rest is handled. Somebody questioned my view about the fetus. I really didn't want to bring up fetuses here. I don't know how it arose, but somebody asked me why. I don't know why. When you get to heaven, ask. I don't know. Makes sense to me. I wouldn't move into a house until it looks like it's built to the point that it's going to stand. I don't know. It's just not a suitable abode, you know. We just ran across that by accident. We found interesting things like your level of consciousness is already present at birth. The time of your death is already set. And the entity doesn't come into the embryo until the 3rd month. I mean, those are just peculiarities, you know. Don't ask me why the sun, the moon, and the stars are there. It's just, that's the way it is. Does it mean anything? I don't see that it really means anything one way or the other, does it? It means you got less to worry about. It's good news in case you didn't know. It's good news. All right. There are people who have very severe karmic difficulties. AIDS population people and all that. We said that the visible world of form is a world of effects. It is not a world of cause. What we see materializing is that which is held in consciousness, then taking form. The Empire State Building was born in imagination of its creator. One day he's smoking his pipe, he put his feet up and he said, wow, what about the tallest building in the world right here on 33rd Street or 32nd? Whatever it is. Out of that vision, out of that intention, out of that arose the Empire State Building. But you see, the Empire State Building was the outcropping into the physical domain of that which already pre-existed in mind. It was consciousness that conceived of it as inspirational, symbolic, provided enormous work during the Depression. So the Empire State Building, which curiously enough calibrates at 425, which is better than the Holy Lands, who calibrated at 130 or something. You're better meditating on the 76th floor of the Empire State Building than you are in... For some reason, the 102nd floor calibrates higher than the 70... What is the main get off? Your 76th floor or forget? No. 86th floor? Anyway, you can take the little elevator, go up to the 102nd. For some peculiar reason, the 102nd floor calibrates higher than the lower observation point. I don't know why. I spoke of they asked me about the third eye. The third eye is an esoteric, sort of occult reference to the chakra system. It means spiritual discernment. It means one intuitively sees the difference between that which is aligned with God and that which is not. It's a knowingness that comes on without any thinkingness. As you read an apology for evil, you just know that it's out. Its integrity is out. You just know its integrity is out. You can go back with the intellect and find out why you think it's out, but it's a knowingness. It's at first glance you can tell what they're up to. Huh? It's like intuition. It's an awareness. The ability to discern truth from falsehood is the huge lack of mankind. Mankind has not evolved to the point of spiritual awareness that you could tell at a glance whether a thing is integrous or not integrous. That's why he was warned against the wolf in sheep's clothing. What Jesus said is, you don't have the capacity of spiritual discernment because your evolution is not high enough that the third eye is not open in you. Because the third eye is not open in you, you need spiritual masters to tell you the difference. You of your own self do not have the capacity. The consciousness level of mankind is into the spleen and the solar plexus, killing and rapacious greed and hungriness. It finally gets up into the capacity for lovingness. It gets up to the capacity for creativity and talkingness. But spiritual awareness, the opening of the third eye, comes belatedly, late. By that time, many spiritual aspirants have made some serious mistakes. This is why we say, stick with that which every mystic throughout, every enlightened being throughout time has described as truth, and don't vary from it. Straight and narrow is the path. There are many carnivals going on the side. Esoteric, other dimensions, things that are peculiar and unique, things that sound bizarre. Think about it. If it sounds bizarre, you know why? Because it's bizarre. I don't know. Strange people get strange messages, and then they start strange belief systems, and they seem to lack there's no dearth of followers. They will follow the most bizarre and crazy things you can even imagine. They're still waiting out in the desert for the UFO to pick them up, you know what I mean? Did Jesus Christ say that? Did Buddha say it? Did Krishna say it? Did any of the great enlightened spiritual masters of all time say anything about that? No. Did they say, go home and do numerology and do the I Ching and do the tarot cards and get a channeling from Master Honky Donk on the other side? Jesus said, that's the way I realized God was I got a channeling from Master Honky Ponk, and he told me to park out there and wait for the UFOs to pick me up. And meantime, eat nothing but grass. And I must cross my toes 14 times a day over hickory nuts. I mean, the bizarre crap that people believe, they haul into my office and they mail it to me, and I say, oh boy. Straight and narrow is the way. You don't need anything peculiar. You don't need anything bizarre. You don't need anything unique. All of mankind is in agreement on certain basic facts. It's so obvious that you really have to be quite resistant to not see it. And then pick some peculiar little excuse. So the people who pick these peculiar deviations from spiritual truth are really resisting God. It's really a way of avoiding the truth, is what it is. And they use it as an excuse, excuse. So the third eye then is the capacity for spiritual discernment. To me, wickedness is to prey upon the innocence of the naivete and distort their capacity to perceive truth. That's my definition of wickedness. To seduce the innocent and brainwash them into believing that which is non-integrous to serve your own selfish ends. That is perversion, degeneracy. So the astral circus is out there waiting for you. And Sedona's right around the corner. You get an aura reading within a block a year, I'll tell you that. Somebody will throw the cards for you, do the ruins, they'll throw something. sheep knee bones. Hey, let's start a school of sheep knee bones. The sacred sheep knee bones. And then we can go how it goes back to ancient Abyssinia and manufacture a whole trip, see? All right. So the true spiritual work is more mundane. It sounds mundane. Doesn't sound exciting, does it? Not like getting a psychic reading, you know what I mean? Psychic reading is so narcissistically fun. You sit there hearing all about you. Tell me about me. I see you were walking there with the oxen, and then your mother-in-law, and you struck her in the head, and then you came back as a knight of the... Wow, man, what an entrancing story. We even have pet psychics to make it up. We'll take Kitty for a reading, Kitty. She was once a cat for Queen Nefertiti. I see that. And then she ate one of the sacred mice and had to come back as a... What about love, romance, and sex? Yes, we don't talk much about that. First time it's come up. What is the part of romantic love, sexuality, etc.? And how would this affect sages, etc.? Well, in the book I'm just finishing, we do track the evolution of mankind, of consciousness. It had nothing to do with love for a long time. It had to do with mating, had to do with animal nature, had to do with, I was going to say recreation, procreation. The story of estrogeny and testosterone. Estrogeny was sitting there one time. She was just round like an egg. And testosterone came waggling after her. Something about you, baby, just makes me wag my tail. I don't know what. Oh, God. One thing we say is popular. You can see the population explosion witnesses the success of estrogeny and testosterone and their love story. Well, love didn't arise until very recently. In the animal kingdom, you see mating, and then he doesn't want anything to do with her. You know what, and leave him is the phrase we use nowadays. And so the lion, after he's done with her, he takes off, and she's got to really protect the cubs because the male lion will come back and eat them. So we don't see love. In the beginning of mankind, in the early times of mankind, even romantic love wasn't there. There was matingness. It's late in evolution that romantic love begins to appear. It's only a couple hundred years ago. The lives of men and women were quite different. He went out to war and whore and get drunk and kill people and be a hero. She stayed home and took care of the hearth and nurtured the babies. But they didn't really hang out together. They had nothing in common, you know. What's with babies and cooking porridge? That's not too cool. When you can be out with the guys hunting the boars and being a hero and getting notches on his belt for infidels that he's killed, etc. Compared to the glories of war, home life is pretty mundane. So he didn't really hang out there. In fact, love itself didn't really appear until we see maternal love. So love didn't appear until you see the nurturance of the mother for the newborn, the mother bird for the... So survival then depended on the emergence of love. The dinosaur doesn't love. It just lays its egg, covers them up, and takes off. If they survive, they survive. It has no interest in the matter whatsoever. So we don't see the beginning of love until we see the maternal instinct. We could say, well, it served the survival. And that's negating the value of a thing by looking at it from the viewpoint of a projected intentionality. What we saw is the beginning of caringness in the form of protection and nurturing. So that was the emergence of love. We did not see it in the cold-blooded reptilian world. You don't see it in the world of snakes. You don't see it in the amphibians. It begins to emerge, and it really emerges in full flower in the mammalian world, with suckling and the mammalian bonding that goes on. There you see the beginning of caringness, caressingness, playfulness. You see the emergence of love now in the animal kingdom. And all of you have cats and dogs and all are witness to the intense maternalness that can take place. The mother cat takes the little kittens and she jeopardizes her own life, jumps off the roof and carries her little kitten over to a safe. That's one of my favorite pictures. It's out of Life magazine, 1986 or something, showing this mother with a little kitten in its mouth, and she's jeopardizing her own life. One mistake and she's a dead cat, to get her little kitten safely from this roof to a tree. So you see the nurturance then of life beginning to evolve. As time went on, the matingness between man and woman now began to take on a different characteristic. For a long time, the woman was only valued for her sexual capacity to sexually satisfy the male and give him heirs. But she as a person wasn't really that much of anything. She was just a concubine, a connubial pleasure, but she had no great value in and of herself. Men and women didn't hang out together. He devalued her, she stewed the pot and all that, but it was him that went out and brought home the bear, you know what I'm saying? And fought the enemies and conquered the enemies. So he was the important one, and she was just sort of the aftermath. Repopulating the population was really sort of accidental. How many real guys from those days you say, gee, I want to have about 4 kids? Like for what? No, the kids came about, and then you learn to love them. So we see nurturance, but you still don't see romance. Romance doesn't come along until about the time of heraldry. Well, it comes, you see it in ancient Greece and all. But the role of women, her status, she now becomes loved for her own sake. She becomes the equal of the man. The woman learned to trade sex for affection. She learned to begin to barter. I'm not going to stay with you unless you're going to marry me, She learned to bargain permanency for his temporary gratification. And with it, of course, ensure the survival of the species, the long-term family unit. Only a couple hundred years ago, people didn't get married for love, and certainly in the upper classes, they didn't get married for love. They got married for political convenience, for the alliance of nations, for the unity of fortunes. In many parts of the world, your wife or your spouse is picked out for you by your parents, and it has to do with family, money. It has nothing to do with romantic love. Romantic love is a very recent invention. It's amazing to think that romantic love is a very recent invention because we watch it every night on television. We say, but of course, Hollywood's version of it, etc. But when we look back in history, we see it didn't really exist very long. In the day of heraldry, of chivalry and feudal times, the knight went out to slay the enemy, and she gave him a flower, you see. She gave him the symbol of the value of femininity. He then wore that close to his heart. Now his life was different. Now his life took on a greater significance. Now he wasn't just fighting to be the hero, but for the feminine. So the feminine then really came into its own, honored, revered, respected, cherished, and became what we know it, how we know it in today's society, in which that perception prevails in those who are, you might say, more conscious and evolved. The woman is loved for her spirit, for her inner self. And her sexuality is also valued as an expression of her beauty, as an expression. So sexuality then becomes a mode of expressing, first of all, of physicality, because the physical body is a derivative of the animal, evolution of the animalness. Testosterone still runs the world, repopulates it, and is, in my view, it is its biggest downside. The biggest difficulty of human life is testosterone. Don't quote me, but that's a fact. It's testosterone that sends all these idiots out there to kill infidels, to prove that you're a hero, to slay the enemy, to prove your worth, to overpopulate the world to the point of starvation. There's whole continents that overpopulate themselves right into absolute starvation and poverty. They're on TV every night. The guy with no job and 8 kids and his wife's pregnant and they're only in their 30s. They're only in their 30s and they're up to kid 8. Now, the problem is testosterone. Behind all killing, savagery. The Japanese who slaughtered all the Chinese in Nanking, killed 30,000 innocent people just for the glee of killing. Just for the glee of killing. So, man owes his survival to testosterone. And he owes about 90% of his pain to the same testosterone. And learning how to handle one's testosterone is the most difficult part of being a male. It's also a very difficult part of being a female. Handling his testosterone, you know. Now they find that women need some testosterone of their own, or else they got complaints to the doctor, you know. So how to balance that, how to envision that, how to keep it in balance. Therefore, love leads to the capacity for reverence for that which is intrinsic and innate within the spirit of one's partner. It can be more than one partner. You can certainly love many in a lifetime. So that's part of the evolution of human consciousness, to come out of matingness into maternal survival, into servitude to the male, then in bargaining that servitude for commitment, then transcending that to romance. Is romance based on first an illusion and then the illusion wears off and now you both look raggedy because you see how it is? Or was the love the reality? Which is which, huh? I always think it's the opposite the way the world sees it. I think when you first see that person and flash on them, that's reality. That's not illusion. The world says, well, that's illusion. No, that's reality. You get who they really are because the naked self is love itself. You see what they are and you fall instantly in love with that energy within them. Then, as time goes on, the ego raises its ugly head and begins to demean it. But in the beginning, you really saw them as they were. You saw their incredible perfection and beauty and stunning handsomeness or whatever it is that attracted you to that person. Then the ego comes up with its self-interest and selfishness, and it's your fault and blame, and you forgot the forks. You ruined the picnic, you forgot the forks. You always blame me for everything. Well, why shouldn't I? You are to the blame for everything all the time. Yeah, but you're to blame for blaming me. You're to blame for blaming me for blaming you. And there it goes downhill. So you have to draw back once in a while and see, what was the reality I saw? It is still there. Of course it's still there. Of course it's still there. Recapture the love and reverence which you have for each other's existence. On the log of calibrated level of consciousness, we list emotions. Some are very high, and some are lesser. We got the wrong one on again. Anyway, how can that be? So it's because different aspects of our personality are at different levels. Our personalities are complex. It's not just one unitized singularity. It's a complexity. We're the composite of all our identifications as we grew up, all the people that impressed us, that we wanted to be like, the ego ideal, various influences, teachers, people of inspiration in our life. So we have different aspects of our personality at different levels of emotional development. One aspect of us can be quite evolved and another quite childish. You know, the healer in us could be quite evolved. The teacher in us, the musician, the stalwart, the hero. Most of us go through lifetimes where we perfect different aspects. The warrior, and some we recall. As you go ahead in consciousness, you begin to intuit, you know, how you got to be that way, and you begin to even start to remember it. I mean, you know very well you did such and such, or you wouldn't be the way you are about that particular thing. There's like a knowingness begins to take over, and you begin to remember. So one's overall level of consciousness could be quite high, and still an emotionality could come up. Well, where does that emotionality coming out of? It's probably coming out of the persona. You know, the persona is that superficial level of your personality, which is not really what you are, you know. Somebody cussing you in traffic and you say, I got to kill that guy. Well, you don't really mean that. If I give you a gun now and say you're going to kill him, and, I was just talking. So there's those superficial emotional reactions, but that isn't who you are. Who you are is based on your spiritual decisions. It's your the spiritual will. So level of consciousness denotes spiritual decision and will and alignment. If you are aligned with that which supports life and supports integrity and supports that which respects the sacred and reverences life, you are in a very high place. Annoyances will come up, but they don't mean anything. And don't forget, we're a karmic inheritance of all the weirdos that lived before this lifetime. So those little memories come up. I think sometimes they come up to be healed, to be recognized, to be acknowledged, and they keep us from becoming egotistical. That we're still capable of making mistakes, keeps us from being holier than thou. It keeps us from being judgmental about the sheer humanness of other people, and compassionate. Do we have to suffer for what the dinosaurs did? Well, some of these reverse cause and effect. You see, events in the world are the consequence of what happens in consciousness. Somebody says, well, what would happen to the consciousness of mankind if we had a war now? Nothing. Because it's the consciousness of mankind where it is now that would manifest as war. It isn't the other way around. So World War II did not alter the level of consciousness of mankind at all. It was expressing where it was at the time, that the great majority of the people would go for what was sold to them. Well, if consciousness is below 200, it's pretty easy to sell it, that which is non-integrous. Don't forget the great Avatar said, your third eye is not open yet. You, for your own sake, do not know the difference between that which is good and that which is wicked, between truth and falsehood. Therefore, you need the guru, you need the teacher, you need the great Avatar, you need the savior. Until consciousness reaches the third eye and the Buddhic body opens up and it's clear that which is wicked and that which is not wicked. I think we should take a break because I'm getting a workout here, folks. You know, this is a great spiritual group and I love being here, and they come up with all these wonderful thoughts, and I thank you for all the questions. So we'll take a break and then we'll continue.